The German anarchist writer and activist Rudolf Rocker wrote in Anarcho Syndicalism, Chapter 1, quote, "The two mutually augment one another, and they are fed from the same source. The economic dictatorship of the monopolies and the political dictatorship of the totalitarian state are the outgrowth of the same political objectives, and the directors of both have the presumption to try to reduce all the countless expressions of social life to the mechanical tempo of the machine and to tune everything organic to the lifeless machine of the political apparatus." End quote. So it, it is a little bit of a clunky statement in some ways. It's a little more wordy than it needs to be, but I think the poetic imagery still gets through. There's, a profound nature to that quote from Rudolf Rocker that feels just as urgent today as it did nearly a century ago. Again, he wrote that the economic dictatorship of the monopolies and the political dictatorship of the totalitarian state are the outgrowth of the same political objectives. It bears repeating. I do somewhat apologize for repeating it, but just keep that in mind. The one of the main points of this episode here. He saw both as feeding from the same source, one economic, one political, but ultimately one and the same machine. And the mechanical hum builds. Together they form a system that prizes control and efficiency above all else, a system that sees freedom not as a right, but as a threat. We've seen this before in dystopian warnings like 1984, and we see echoes of it now in real life, in our economies, our politics, even our daily routines. It's the merger of power. In this world, the state and the corporation are no longer separate forces. They've merged, two sides of the same coin, turning endlessly in the hands of power. Corporate monopolies fuel political agendas, political decrees protect corporate interests. It's a feedback loop that amplifies itself. The wealth of the few becomes the law of the land, and the law of the land preserves the wealth of the few. This is what Václav Havel described in The Power of the Powerless, a system that sustains itself not just through violence alone, but through compliance, habit, and resignation. You can sort of hear it like a faint ticking clock. And the people, they're caught in between. Citizens reduced to workers, workers reduced to data points. Their creativity, their autonomy stripped away in the name of progress. It's the mechanization of life. Rocker called it the mechanical tempo of the machine. And that machine keeps expanding. Factories once set the rhythm. Now it's algorithms, automation, bureaucracy, in addition to some elements of the old fashioned factory. And you can almost hear it if you have imagination. Slow mechanical rhythm melding itself into a human heartbeat. Every beat of modern life is measured, optimized, standardized. Labor becomes a line of code. Culture becomes a product. Even dissent gets absorbed, packaged, and sold back to us as a brand of rebellion. And our institutions, schools, media, even art start to speak the same language, one of compliance, order, and predictability. The system's dream is a perfectly synchronized society where everything and everyone operates in harmony with the machine. But that harmony comes at a price. Diversity, creativity, and human freedom are often sacrificed at the altar of efficiency. It is the cost of conformity. And when someone dares to step out of line, to ask too many questions, to offer a little bit too much resistance, the machine reacts the only way it knows how, by suppressing. Those who speak out are labeled as disruptors, troublemakers, enemies of progress, because the machine doesn't tolerate friction, at least not that much of it. It demands smooth operation, it demands conformity, and sometimes it actually demands silence. But history shows every machine breaks down eventually, and what cracks it open is actually the human spirit, the refusal sometimes. And Maya Angelou once said, "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them." That's the essence of resistance in a mechanized world, to refuse reduction, to reclaim what power makes us human: our creativity, our spontaneity, our capacity for compassion. There will always be those who push back against the grinding gears: artists, thinkers, workers, dreamers, who refuse to be turned into mere cogs. Their struggle isn't easy, but it's necessary, because if the machine represents control, then their resistance, perhaps awkwardly and clumsily, represents life. And, the heartbeat returns. The question isn't just whether the machine will keep running unabated and uncontested. We know there will always be some disruption. It's whether we'll keep feeding its unrelenting appetite, because every act of freedom, every choice to create, to question, to care, is a potential monkey wrench thrown into its system. Because, again, the capacity to and even envision life independently of the status quo, that itself is actually a bit of a threat. And maybe that's how we begin to slow it down, not by outpacing the machine, but by remembering what it means to be human. That's really at the core of so much positive human change throughout history, is just getting back to basics, getting back to the roots of what matters in life. That's one of the fundamental critiques I have of the status quo. Is it's not so much that it's all oppressive all the time, because it really isn't, at least not for everybody in an equal sense of the word oppression. But really, when it all comes down to it, you just need to be able to question the idea that profits must control literally every aspect of human life, every endeavor. Does everything truly require a price tag on it? Or should some things maybe not be up for sale or up for rent? Should some things be decommodified? And it's really up to us to decide, in some ways, through our thoughts and our actions, what we're willing to say belongs to everybody, and perhaps to nobody. That's something that we're not supposed to really think about. The concept of not everything or everyone needs to be owned or represented by a system, even, necessarily. And at the end of the day, these are all questions that will emerge quite naturally if a society appears to be crumbling or falling apart, however you want to phrase it, coming apart at the seams. Sometimes people will be forced to deal with these sorts of questions and to decide what really matters. Sometimes things have to get worse before they get better. Unfortunately, they don't always get better after they get worse, at least not for everybody. But again, one of our tasks as human beings is to realize what it means to think for oneself, and to realize what it fundamentally means to be human, as opposed to just some cog in that machine. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Um, I went on a little bit longer than I expected. I thought this was going to be a little bit shorter, but oh well. Anyway, Have a wonderful day. I hope this provided food for thought.